So, honey, what have we learned over 17 years of marriage?
Yes, that's what we're going to talk about today. Don't you guys all want to hear all the good, the bad, the ugly?
Yeah, so, hopefully, 'cause I don't know how long you've been married, but you always want to be learning.
Oh, and I love to learn from other people.
Yes, I love to learn from other people's mistakes.
Yes.
And so we're going to talk about some of the mistakes we've made. And because really, you learn a lot more sometimes from the mistakes than kind of the how-tos.
Yeah, and you don't really hear people talk about that. You hear more about the how-tos.
Yeah, so, hopefully you learn something, because we've seen sometimes guys, I'll just speak for the guys. We did the same things over and over again and keep upsetting our wives, right? And
Why is
you think
that?
you'd learn. I don't know. I think there's something like, I think it's a
Are you just
competitive
trying to
issue.
annoy
I
us?
think it's a competitive issue sometimes where we got to, you're not going to fix me. You're not going to change me kind of thing.
You're not going to control me.
Yeah, there's a lot
Tell
of
me
things,
what to do.
but it just makes things just more miserable. So we're going to pass along some of the things we've learned over the 17 years of marriage, and hopefully this helps you. And hopefully this will be you're going to have to do a little bit of introspection and go, hey, I'm doing the same things. I'm not changing what I'm doing. I'm not changing my approach. So maybe instead of me trying to hope and change my spouse, maybe I should change what I do.
Yeah, so take a listen, you guys, and see if you can relate to any of the experiences that we've gone through.
Yeah, so we're going to give you a little insight into 17 years of our marriage.
Yes.
And hopefully there's some takeaways, at least one takeaway from you that will help you in your marriage. So ready to talk?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go. Let's do this. Welcome to the Power Up Your Marriage and Business podcast. We're your hosts, Robert and Kaylee Fukui. I know we're supposed to say we created this podcast for you, but we really created this for us. Because one of the power struggles we witnessed growing up and now dealing with in the present is balancing the needs of the business with priorities of marriage. Does this sound familiar?
As children of entrepreneurs, we're often on the receiving end of that struggle. Parents worked so hard to provide that they did not have time for us. We realized it wasn't their fault. They did only what they knew. But not wanting to repeat the past, we've been intentional about building a business that we run as opposed to it running us.
Every day we fight to keep the priorities the priority: faith, family, and finance, or the business. Some think it's impossible, but we say it's possible. You just need to challenge the false belief that a successful business only comes at the sacrifice of your family. It doesn't have to happen that way, and we know we're not the only couple to think this way and achieve it.
If you listen to some of our past episodes and tune in for future ones, you will hear from some amazing marriage experts and entrepreneur couples that have been able to build a thriving marriage and prosperous business at the same time.
So that's why we created this podcast, to be in the front row and hear from others that have gone before us. And from time to time, we'll share what has worked for us as well. But we know there's more to learn and want to take you along for the ride with us. We may never get it perfect, but with intention, we can all build a thriving marriage and prosperous business. So thank you for listening. Sit back, get comfortable, and let's power up your marriage and business. Hello, and it is
My anniversary.
our anniversary, honey. See how she is? We're 17 years of marriage, and what's ours is hers, and what's hers is hers.
Yeah, you told me that after we got married.
That's not quite what I said.
That's how I understood it.
Yeah, see? So here's one of the things we've learned over 17 years of marriage. What one intends may not necessarily be understood the same way by your spouse.
Isn't that what
right?
you said to me?
No, that's what you interpreted.
Oh, I thought that's what you said.
No. So here we are, honey, 17 years in marriage, and we're up to Central Coast in the wine country, and just right now we're just overlooking the back deck of our Airbnb and looking over wine country. Just beautiful time to get away.
Yeah, beautiful
and reflect.
Paso Robles.
Yeah. And so one of the things we're doing also on our just anniversary trip is to kind of reflect. We've had a lot of significant changes over the last month or so, and a lot of good ways. And so kind of planning for the future, but also reflecting on the past. And so that's why I want to do this episode here, on our anniversary, to talk about some of the things we've learned over 17 years that we've kind of talked about over the last couple of days, right?
Yes.
So ready to jump into this, honey?
I'm ready. Let's go.
So one of the things we've learned is that we do both like wine. So that's good.
Well, I think we knew that before we got married. So I don't
that's
know
why
if that was a...
we're out here in wine country. But we like a lot of the same things, but we also have some differences and, some of the other extracurricular activities that we like to do.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. There are a lot of things that we like that are the same. But at the same time, we have different hobbies.
Yeah. So, what just comes to mind, honey? What are some of the things that you've learned about yourself, about us, about how we do marriage and business? And that's a big, broad question, but I'm going to kick it off.
Yeah, you just love asking me those big ones, don't you?
Well, I'll start it out to get you thinking.
Okay, sounds good.
So, one of the things I've learned is like some of the things I shouldn't say or do. So, it's always good to learn what to do in marriage. But I think what's even more important is what not to do or say.
Oh my gosh. And while you're saying that reminds me of some of our friends and some of the crazy stories of what they've done, the guys. Mm-hmm. But anyways, yeah. I don't want to go down that rabbit trail.
So one of the things I've learned not to say is something to the effect of you're being too sensitive or you're overreacting.
Just get over it.
Yeah, exactly. So that doesn't tend to work out well.
No, that doesn't.
And so as you're listening, you're probably laughing because
I'm sure they don't do the same
probably
thing.
Said it you said it yourself, or
what's
it's been
the big
said to
deal?
you, right? Yeah, what's the big deal? And so the moment you say something like that, like what's the big deal? You're overreacting, or it's not a big deal. It's automatically become a big deal at that point.
Right.
Right.
It doesn't matter what the issue was before.
Yeah.
But now you're upset that you just told me, why am I being so sensitive?
Yeah, because so actually, good point, right? Is that now the argument isn't about the topic. Mm-hmm. It's about how you reacted.
Right. You triggered me. So now I'm like...
So I said, it's not a big deal. You're overreacting. So now the argument is really about what I said.
Right.
In response to your, whatever issue you raised.
Yeah, because I already forgot the first thing I was upset about.
Mm-hmm. So lesson number 1 is stay to the topic at hand. Don't trigger your spouse. And also another thing, and this actually came up in our counseling session when we were dating, is not walking out on each other.
Right. That's huge for me.
So why is that, honey?
Because growing up in my family, whenever we had heated discussions, because I guess you could call that conflict. I would think of it, we didn't really do conflict, but I guess if you don't handle it well, that it's doing it too. But my family would get mad. They'd walk out on you into a different room. They'd get in the car, storm in the driveway. They'd hang up the phone on you. So we didn't resolve conflict. Our way of dealing with it was just walking out and being emotionally unavailable.
Yeah, so that's obviously not healthy. When you're having a disagreement or trying to resolve an issue, those triggers. I mean, that trigger is not helpful.
Yeah. So my thought was, if you're going to get upset with me, you're going to walk out on me, and I don't know if you're going to come back.
Yeah. So we learned. I learned, even though that's not how we were raised at our house. So that never crossed my mind really. But then, when our counselors said, "Hey, if you do need to take a break," which sometimes when you're in the middle of a heated discussion, it is okay to take a time out. And if you're hearing any scratching, that's our dog in the corner there, just digging away at the carpet. I don't know what she's doing, but when if you do need to take a break, then you just got to let the other person know.
Right.
You need to take a break, and then we'll pick this up in a half hour, or whatever.
Yeah. So we just say, we love you. I'm a little upset right now. I need a break. I'll be back at such and such time. And then you honor that, and then you come back and...
Yeah, and
then I have a peace of mind knowing that you're going to come back. You're not in my mind like, oh my gosh, she's upset. Is he going to come back? I don't know. And when?
Yeah, so even though it never really crossed my mind, but she brought it up in counseling and just said, gave us that tip of what we just talked about right now of how to deal with that situation. The other thing is I've learned what not to do, even though this is a hard one for me not to do. Is to shut down in the middle of a disagreement, is to kind of shut down, kind of get in my corner and just get quiet. Right. Because then what do you do?
Then I feel like you're emotionally unavailable, and then it makes me like insecure, and then I'm like probably start
hounding you about like what's going on and talk to me, and then you go further and further in your shell, and I'm like chasing after you. And
Yep. It's like trying to corner a tiger. Cornering a wounded tiger. Yeah. So shutting down is not healthy. And even though that's kind of my go to, especially as an introvert, and, we use a DISC profile, and so I'm a SC. And so what happens in moments of stress is I kind of retreat to get a little bit more introspective. I'll be thinking, I just don't want to talk about it. It's just what's going on. But I know it's not healthy for you and for your spouse that is more of an external processor. You do need to communicate at some level. So, the trick is then how do you create a safe space for me to come out and share what's on my mind, right?
right. That's true. And then sometimes if we knew like something like we were getting ready, our dog was not doing well at one time before he passed on. And I said to you, honey, I really need you to be there emotionally for me. Can you be there? Don't check out like after he passes on. And then you said, no, I can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I had a peace of mind about that I didn't feel like I was rejected or I had to carry all the emotions myself, that I had someone to process through with.
Mm-hmm. So shutting down is definitely on the not to-do list, the out list, right? Hitting back with past issues.
Well, and because I want to say that too, because in our family, we were emotionally unavailable. And when we would get upset, we would just totally shut down emotionally. Like, okay, I'm not going to give you anything emotional. It was like a form of rejection and shunning and pushing people away by doing that. Mm-hmm. And so that was the reason I had asked you if you can be there for me emotionally. So,
yeah. And the other thing too, in my family, it was kind of similar. My dad, I'm a lot like my dad, obviously. And so he would shut down. And I didn't really want to talk about things. And then, my mom would push, and then he would just get really upset. And so that's kind of how that would happen. And so just having to come up with a game plan or some rules of engagement on how to make sure that we create a safe space for each other to speak in a very, productive manner, right? Mm-hmm. Not feel like I'm getting caged into a corner or backed into a corner. The other thing I learned is not to hit back with past issues.
Oh,
right?
not keeping track.
The past. Yep, keeping score.
Tit for tat, honey. Remember when?
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
You did this to me.
Exactly. I remember that, honey.
I don't know which one, but
so,
okay.
Yeah, hitting back with past issues, not helpful. So, what do we do with that? What do we do with that? Right? Mm-hmm. And so, that's just on our list and our rules of engagement. If you've been listening to us long enough that, what we're talking about is what we shouldn't say or do, kind of what's out of bounds in rules of engagement. So these are things we don't do. And so hitting back with past issues. So usually what happens when we're bringing up the past is that that's really just a sign that we haven't resolved that particular issue.
Right.
Right. And so what happens is when we get into another argument, then we'll raise it up again, because we're using it as ammunition of, see, you always do this every time. You always go down this road. Not helpful. So we're not solving the issue. We're just hitting back with past issues. And then the more unresolved stuff we have, the more ammunition we have, just kind of throw each other all the past issues.
Well,
we never resolve any of them.
Stuck in that gunk, and then you're not moving forward. Mm-hmm. And then it builds up resentment.
Yeah. So definitely not helpful. That's not things we shouldn't do, right? So those are some things off the top of my head.
Well, and I want to say too, then if I keep track of all that stuff, then one day I'm just going to blow. That's how my family is. We just throw up on people. Mm-hmm. And it's usually the worst time. And someone that totally does not deserve it.
That's true. You can blow up on somebody else. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It could be a friend. Or
a stranger,
or another family member, or at work, or we're entrepreneurs, so you could be taking it out at someone in the business, whether it's an employee, maybe even a customer or vendor. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of that pent up frustration, can come out in different ways to other people,
and it's going to affect your health.
And it affects your health.
Big time.
Yeah, all that bottled up, unresolved stuff is just another form of stress.
Yeah.
And stress is a huge risk factor for a lot of diseases.
Yeah. Anger. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if it's not your physical, like diabetes or heart disease or something like that, I mean, your mental
Right.
toll, right? And that can really, really affect you. And so definitely don't want that to happen. So, solving, just storing up past issues, we got to solve these things.
Well, and it's interesting. Your body will hold on to all that stuff, and that's how it affects you. One of the many ways it can affect you emotionally or physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the things I've learned is, I think we both learned, is, when we get upset at each other over something they do or say, it's often a mirror of ourselves.
Oh, yeah, that's so true.
Right? And it's not even just between you and me, but it can be somebody else that we get upset about something they do or say. And it's really a mirror on ourselves of kind of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I may get upset at you because you're not ready to make a certain decision. But then, of course, there's times when I'm like that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You just said that recently.
I did.
So, yeah, there's time and place where we often do the very same thing that our spouse does that gets us upset.
Or like if I do something and I'm okay with it, and then you do something and then it bugs me, the same exact thing. I'm like, and then you're like, well, honey, you do the same thing. And I'm like, well, it's different.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's me.
Yeah. But when you do it, it's irritating.
Exactly. So really check yourself, right? There's that one scripture in Matthew, I believe. It's about, basically saying you're a fool. Just take the log or the plank out of your own eye so you can see a little bit more clearly the speck in somebody else's.
Right.
Right?
Well, and honestly, the only one that we can change is ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like I might get triggered by something you say, but I'm still responsible for my emotions and how I handle the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how do you handle the situation, honey?
I count to 10.
Well, that's a good start. I think patience is a good start.
I journal a lot, almost daily. I pray. Sometimes I just have to go spend time with the Lord and like, okay, Lord, I'm really upset right now and I need you to help me with this.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'm just not in the place to handle my emotions well and do it in a healthy way where I'm not going to wound or hurt somebody else. Even though I really want to, I know I need to have self-control. And so I'm like, okay, you know what? I probably need to excuse myself right now. And I've had to do that before. We were at dinner one time and I had to do that and excuse myself and take a break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she wasn't upset at me.
No.
Somebody else. But yeah, you got up and you walked away. And we're kind of in the middle of an outdoor restaurant, and she goes walking away, and I'm looking.
No.
Okay.
I said though before. I said I need a break.
Yeah.
I just didn't get up and leave. So.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of what it looked like. You just got up and left. I mean, to the rest of the group.
Right, probably.
So yeah, I had to go chasing after you to make sure you're fine. And
I needed to get away. I didn't want to say something that I was going to regret. I didn't want to have an ugly moment. Mm-hmm. And so I figured, you know what? The best thing to do is excuse myself and try and get my thoughts together.
Yeah. No, that was a tough situation, but yeah, you handle that well, honey. And then, before you get upset at your spouse, is check yourself and say, is this something I do or say? Mm-hmm. Who am I to get upset at your actions when I do something similar? Mm-hmm. And then it's about, okay, how do we just deal with the matter at hand and just resolve the issue? Just communicate and talk freely, not just say, you do this, you do that.
Well, I think another huge one we learned in counseling is asking clarifying questions, because I was brought up, you don't ask any questions and you don't bother people. So a lot of times I really didn't know what was going on, because you walk in the middle of a conversation, you hear part of it, and sometimes I think I hear something that you said, and if I check it out with you, I'll be like, honey, what did you mean by that? And you're like, because I heard da-da-da-da, and you're like, no, I didn't say that at all. Mm-hmm. And that could have turned into a big misunderstanding, which would turn into an argument and getting triggered. Yeah. But sometimes just asking clarifying questions makes a huge difference in diffusing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or it wasn't the way I took it isn't the way you meant it.
Right.
Is another.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's then move on to what to do. We talked
Okay.
about the what not to do's. Here's some of the things we learned not to do or say. What about what some of the things we should do or say? And so one of the things for me is, and it's still hard, but I've been better at it after 17 years. After 17 years of training, you get better and better at these things. But empathizing is easier than arguing.
Isn't that the truth?
And so, I'm sure you've heard this, or either you've told this to your spouse or you've heard it, your spouse has told you that, I just need you to empathize.
Mm-hmm.
When you're upset at me, you come to me and you're upset about something I did or said, then the first thing I usually want to do is defend myself by either trying to clarify, no, that's, you're overreacting. or you're misinterpreting what I said.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so going through all the explanations and defending myself, and you'd think, once you clarify my intent, then it all would be good.
Right. Once you can justify it, then everything should be fine.
And so, but
once I get her on my side, I can make her see my way of thinking.
Yeah, for some reason it doesn't work. so I guess, what I've had to learn, and I know even in counseling, she told us, but still, I think it takes, until you actually do it, you don't really get it. But empathizing with your spouse is not admitting any wrongdoing.
Right.
Right. And I think that's where it's hard for, well, at least I think for guys in general, to do the empathy thing, because it feels like you're admitting defeat. Right? Like, I'm saying you're right, but I don't think you're right. and so, I remember that one of the first times I did it, and I said, oh, I really understand how that made you feel and why you're so upset. I can see why what I did made you upset. And then things went well.
Yeah, and when you said it, you meant it.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't do it just to, it's just because, like a counselor said, you should say it. But, when you start to think about, oh, okay, I see how, that can make you upset. And when I did that, especially the first time, it was like, oh, that solved the issue.
Yeah, I just wanted to be heard.
Yeah. And so...
Were you disappointed? Because it kind of just dissipated after that.
I don't know if I was disappointed.
Like, that's it? Like, I was one to big brawl.
It felt,
put up your dukes.
It did feel weird because I was like, but in a good way, I was like, oh, that's it? That's all I got to do? And it went away.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so, and then, but also, I think what it does is, as you reflect on how it made you upset, and then kind of how to avoid those things.
Right.
Right. And it doesn't change, just say when golfing and I got home later and I thought, and I didn't call you or text you to let you know.
Right.
And so
because I was making dinner.
You get upset. And so a lot of times what we think we're hearing is that you don't want me to be out with the guys and having fun.
Right. And I want to know where you're at every second.
Yeah. But it was just more of a, hey, courtesy call. Ahead of time you're going to be late, so just let me know so I don't have to prepare something.
Yeah, I know you're running late, so I thought, okay, dinner doesn't have to be done at a certain time because you're running a little bit late, so I can start a little bit later.
Mm-hmm. So I think empathizing and just really reflecting, a reflection of how, what the things that you say or do to your spouse and how that makes them feel. One, when you're empathizing, obviously we have a deeper connection because you know that I understand you or I hear you. And then for me, you can start to understand, hey, maybe I need to avoid these things. That will prevent any kind of big blow up.
Right.
So empathizing is not admitting defeat or any kind of wrongdoing. It's just about just understanding, letting your spouse know you hear and understand her or them, And then, and then reflect and say, hey, maybe I just need to make some adjustments on what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Ask, what do you need?
That's what I was going to say.
Oh, okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Especially for women, ladies, we think men should be able to read our minds, know what we want.
Yeah.
Sorry, we need to be able to communicate it. And the sooner we know what we need, the easier it is to get things resolved. Because sometimes I am not feeling heard, or if I can, like one time we were in an argument, I don't even remember what it was, and you're like, honey, what do you need? And I said, I need a hug. And you're like, really? A hug? Seriously? Because, I can go into problem solving mode. I can do all this other stuff. And I'm like, no, I just need a hug. And you gave me a hug, and I was on my merry way. And you were like, what?
Shocked.
Yeah. See?
That was it?
That's it.
So, yeah, what do you need? What do you need from me? It's a great question.
And if you can preface it ahead of time, like sometimes I just need, I'm an auditory processor, so sometimes I just need you to help me process through something. Sometimes I do need a solution. Sometimes I just need you to listen.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can say that ahead of time, it just saves us so much time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it'll help me understand, well, number one, what you need. Because as men, we often go into problem-solving mode. And women typically just want to be heard and understood.
Yeah. So then I talk a little bit louder and slower, because I think if I talk a little louder, you'll understand me and I'll get what I want.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that make sense or what?
Exactly. And so, when I know that, hey, this isn't problem solving time, it's really about just listening, then I can just go into listening mode and help you process, as opposed to me trying to give you a solution that you may not even know you need a solution to, or you're wanting to just to process through with somebody, but when I'm in solution mode, it interrupts probably a train of thought.
Well, it frustrates me because I feel like you're just throwing all these different things out, all these different solutions, and I feel like you're not listening. I'm not being heard, and that just frustrates me more. It gets me upset because I'm like, no, you're completely off the mark here.
Yeah. And so, we're just talking at one of our groups, one of the husbands was talking about this very thing, and, I think what I said was, when his wife's verbally processing, and he would get upset because she would process and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and finally get into some kind of solution at the very end. And I said, well, do you often see that it's the similar solution that you're trying to give her? And he said, yeah. And so does that frustrate you? Yeah. I said, well, here's the thing though. I said, if you just let her process and just let her come to their own conclusion, you don't really have to interject your own conclusion that she's going to come to anyway, but just let her process, because all you're doing is, when you're giving her solutions in the middle of her basically verbal train of thought, you're interrupting her, which just frustrates her.
Right. And then she's going to get there a lot sooner and quicker if you just let her talk.
And you're going to come to the same conclusion anyway.
And then he doesn't have to do anything besides just listen.
Yeah. So instead of just trying to interject and having her get upset at you when she's going to come to the same conclusion anyway, just talk it through.
When in doubt, ask. You can always ask. Are you processing through
exactly.
right now?
What do you need from me?
Trying to figure out.
Right? It comes back to that question. What do you need from me? Mm-hmm. So whenever we find ourselves, kind of arguing, then just stop and say, okay, what do you need from me? Mm-hmm. If you can preface ahead of time, great. But if not, the spouse in the receiving end just has to recognize that and say, okay, what do you need from me? This isn't going anywhere.
What if they don't know what they need?
Then still just process, right? Because there's no solution to give when they don't know they need a solution.
Yeah, because there's nothing you have to do then.
And along the same lines,
they don't know.
How can I serve you? I think just asking that question, whether daily, whatever, how can I serve you?
Because I think a lot of times this question is not going to be, and this one as well is not going to be the answer you think it's going to be. Because sometimes it's just something really small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're like, oh, that's it? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of things we can do to, whether it's resolve the issue or prevent something from getting bad. They're very simple solutions. It's just that I think in our minds, we think, as you're saying, that how you solve the problem is going to be a lot bigger, more complicated than it really is. I think we overcomplicate the problem because of the way we respond, the way we interject, the way we present the issue, and the way we respond to the issue.
Well, and I think too, when you say, how can I serve you? In your mind, you're like, oh my gosh, they're going to give me a laundry list of 1,000 things to do.
Yeah.
Which
Sure.
it could be one little small thing
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
could totally do. And you're like, oh yeah, I can totally.
Yeah, we found out for ourselves and even with our own clients, it's usually a very simple, small thing. And it's not a laundry list of stuff you got to do. That you got to go like build a new house or something like that.
Yeah.
so, but I think that's what prevents us to asking those kind of simple questions, the most direct questions, is because we think in our head it's going to be bigger.
Right.
The answer that they're going to give is a lot bigger than it really is. It's like it's admitting a defeat or whatever. There's all these things that I think run into head. So it goes down to kind of how we started this conversation. A lot of assumptions we have a lot of assumptions going into these things that are mostly false. But if we can just clarify some things and just present the issue.
I found that to be true. A lot of them are false, and there are these big, huge things that we think they are. But once you start talking about them, you realize that. You're like, oh my gosh, this really isn't true.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you need? Like I said, the hug. What do you need from me? And I think I remember just preparing myself for all these things you're going to say, but you just responded with a hug.
You gave me one, and then I was on my merry way, and you were just sitting there like, what just happened?
And so I think just remember that as you find yourself in an argument or something like that, just ask each other what you need, and you're going to find that the solution is a lot simpler than you think, and you'll resolve the issue a lot faster than just trying to defend yourself, prove yourself right, all that kind of stuff.
Because that takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and it wears you down. It's stressful.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's some of the things that we've learned over 17 years, right, honey?
Yes.
And it's not that we have these things down perfect, but at least we know what we go to, and how we resolve issues or how we try and prevent some issues that come up, to become a big thing. You just don't want the small issue to become a big issue.
Right. Which reminds me of this, what you used to say to me. You haven't said it in a long time, because we are a work in progress, as you were saying, and we have to deal through all these same things you guys have to go through, resolving conflict. But one time, actually, you've said it more than once. You're like, honey, do you really want to argue about this? And part of me, like, inside, like, yes, I want to win at all costs. But then I thought, oh my gosh, this is really a petty, small little thing. And I'm like, no, I don't think I want to argue about how come he didn't put the lid back on the toothpaste. It's like, you know what I mean? Even though it might bug me, it's like, yeah, I don't think it's really worth getting into a big to-do fight over that. It's like sometimes, and it kind of like when you say that, it kind of gets me thinking, it gets me out of that defensive mode, like being upset. It kind of gets my mind on the other side of my brain. And then I'm thinking, yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense to get in a big fight about that.
Yeah. So well, I hope you found this helpful, what we've learned over 17 years of marriage. And, I'm sure you've heard these things before, especially if you've listened to our podcast, but it's always good to re-listen to these things, hear some of these things over and over, because like, again, even for us, I mean, we know this stuff, we talk about this stuff, but it's still, when you apply it, in practicality, when you apply it on a day-to-day basis, you don't always get it right. But at least if you can remember, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, then even in the midst of an argument, you can at least right the ship, right? Even in the middle of an argument.
Well, and we're so much stronger as a couple when we're on the same page and we can get things resolved, because we can move through life so much easier and not have all these different topics of things we can't talk about that's under the rug and resentment, because it affects your business as well.
Yep.
and the success of it.
Yep. Because, from the business angle, especially if you're working together like we do, probably the number one thing that stunts growth in a business when husband and wives are working together is just your ability to come to agreement and move forward, right? That's kind of what we found. Another thing that we found for ourselves and even working with our clients is just coming to agreement.
Right.
And just being able to talk through things and coming to agreement. And a lot of times the things you're disagreeing with, even in business, what we've talked about even in personal, a lot of times we'll come to the same conclusion, a very similar conclusion that individually we thought about for ourselves, or you come up with a better solution than you thought for when you're thinking for yourself. A lot of times when we're talking it through with our spouse, we come up with a different solution that's actually better.
Right.
Right?
It's true.
So don't hold so fast to whatever you think is right. So anyways, hope this helps. And
send us what your strategies are for resolving conflict.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your ideas and takeaways.
Yeah, go ahead and email it to us at info@powercouplesbydesign.com. So yeah, give us an email, give us a shout out, and leave a review and share this with another entrepreneur couple that needs to hear this.
And please subscribe.
Yep.
Because you mean so much to us, you guys. We really want you to know that we appreciate you.
Yeah, so
all of our listeners.
Happy anniversary to us, honey.
Happy anniversary.
And here's to 17 more great years, honey. You've been an amazing partner in life and business. And so I really appreciate what you bring to this.
Oh, I appreciate you too. This has been a great, fun ride with you.
Yep. So now for some more wine tasting.
Yes.
All right. Talk to you all next week. God bless. Thank you for listening to the Power Up Your Marriage and Business podcast. If you found this episode to be valuable, please leave a rating and share it with an entrepreneur couple you know.
Yes, and remember to hit the subscribe button so that you'll get all of our latest episodes, and visit our website, Power Couples by Design, to access a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business, like our weekly videos and on-demand webinars. And don't forget to download our free 8-step guide that you can find on our homepage to help your marriage and business thrive.
We're here to help you build a thriving marriage and a prosperous business. God bless your marriage and business. See you next week.